Thank you very much. Let's go to my report. The first item is uh,
And record. I don't see the
board
recording.
members.
I don't see
Yes,
the recording icon here.
recording. Let me make sure that we are recording. Hold on one second. Recorded on the cloud, but it's also recorded in YouTube as well. Uh, I received an email from Tricia Shimamura from the Board of President's office. She is the Director of Community Affairs. She sent an email today uh, to half of the board members that need to renew this year, that the term finished in March 2022. Uh, she that she emailed directly to the people who need to renew, and she CC me. If you receive that email, make sure that you submit your application no later than March 1st before 5 p.m. If you are not sure, if you need to renew, you can call me and I can let you know if if you are part of the group of people that need to renew for the year 22. I just want to inform you that Paola Garcia is out on vacation until March 2nd, 2022. The office is only operating with Chanel Paniagua and myself. If you need something from the office and you email Paola, you're going to get a automatic reply saying that she's out on vacation. So the committees that she support, feel free to call me or Chanel so we can help you with anything you need. The New York Presbyterian Hospital donate to the office or the community board a few boxes of the N95 Max. We have a few boxes in the office in case anyone needs some mask. We're more than happy to give it to you. It's there. We received it this afternoon. And lastly, our IT technician from Do It, Mr. Joe Coluccio, who was serving the board for the last 20 something years, is no longer working with the city of New York. And we don't have a assigned IT person. Hopefully that our equipment got well. He was in the office last December when he installed the new computers that we got. So far, so good. Our system is good. But just to let you know that we don't have a IT person. It may take a little longer to resolve any issue. Hopefully that we don't have any issue to resolve. This is the end of my report. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
I think Steve has a hand raised. I don't know whether he has a question for you or
not. Steve, any question for me?
Yeah, is the office now open to members of the public? Can they come to the office to pick up masks?
Yes, I am in the office for the most part from between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Yes, the office is open. We receive people from time to time. They come to delivery application, looking for information. And yes, we are open. We are open.
Well, should we post that people can now come to our office to pick up the N95 masks?
You can say that. We don't have that much. We have a few boxes, but yes, it's first come, first serve. If our chair approves that we can blast that, we can do that. We have it, and it's to give it away.
Well, if you have a few boxes, I assume you must have several hundred, right? How many do you have?
Oh, I didn't have a chance to count it because I was getting ready to come to my house for this meeting tonight. Well, but I think we have a few hundred. Yes, definitely. Yes.
Okay. Well, my suggestion would be that we try to distribute them as quickly as we can, since people do need them. I would send out an email blast letting people know that they can come to the office, and maybe we should limit the number that they can each take. That's what's being done most often now. Each person could get maybe 3 or 4 or whatever. But we should.
Yes. Building on that.
Wait a second, Tally. Do you have a question related to his report?
Yes. Following up on what Steve said.
Yeah, sure.
I would suggest that we have like a 4-hour window when people can pick them up. Like we say that we have masks at community board 12 if people need 95 masks, they can come Monday through Friday between, let's say 10 and 2 or whatever you want to put the hours, but it should be a limited time frame. And then the second thing is,
What a second.
Ebenezer, you can get masks from health and hospitals every time. I mean, the test and trace people, every time they come and talk to us, they say, we can get supplies to you. So I think we should put a request, and maybe we can do it through health and environment, out to those guys so that we can arrange a delivery of supplies and we're not just dependent on those few hundred. But I think that that would be an important service for our community.
Before you do that, call the management office and see what the protocol is before you make
Okay.
any arrangements that you may or may not.
Yeah,
They
I'll
might
reach out to
may
them.
or may- No, I'm just telling Ebenezer to call, let the management company know about what we're trying to do and see what that can fit within their protocols. Liz Ritter.
Thanks. Mindful that I am a retiree and have a fairly flexible schedule, and that Paola is out on vacation. If you need help, Ebenezer, if as part of staffing the office to do a mask giveaway, that's an extra lift on your staff with being down one person. So if it's helpful for you I'm certainly willing to come in and help with that, because I'm retired and I have time during the day.
Okay, thank you for offering yourself. Yes.
It could be, and if it works better for Columbia, if they want it to be like in the lobby, or if they only want it on a couple of particular days, or like whatever. But let's figure that out, and I'm happy to help.
Great. Thank you, Ebenezer, for your report, and thank you guys for Liz for volunteering. I'd like to get Sally's report.
I think Richard Allman wants to say something.
Yeah, real briefly. Following Ebenezer, there are also home test information we might want to send out. People can pick up home test kits, home COVID test kits at the public libraries right now. The exact information is on the Health and Hospitals Department website. It's real easy to pick off of that website and make a flyer out of it, or say which libraries in the neighborhood have that available, the rules with it. Second thing, real quickly, I wanted to make a procedural request 6 months ahead. Ebenezer, would you start just taking a look at how we relook at how we do the budget process in the fall? I find that timeline, which is so compacted, and asking us then to fill out a fairly complex form in a short period of time, one of the most difficult things we're asked to do. And I'd just like to see us take a look at the calendar to see if we could stretch that out 10 days in one direction or another, just something that made it a little bit easier.
Okay, I can look into that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sally, your treasurer's report.
Yes, I think I will start by seconding what was just said. There are materials out there to explain the budget process to, especially to board members, new board members. People don't understand what's going on. Our timeframes, a lot of boards start the discussion in the summer, those that meet in the summer, but I think it has to be a longer process because it is a shit show at the end. What I wanted to specifically comment on tonight, which is time sensitive, is that requests from organizations, including community boards, must be in to the city council by February 22nd. Last year, we received through discretionary funding $18,500. There was $5,000 provided by Udonis for outreach, et cetera. And I guess a decision was made at some point that this be for translation services. And there was $10,000 provided by Udonis through the in one of the two environmental initiatives, which is supposed to be for litter removal, graffiti removal, and that kind of stuff, which the Health and Education Committee is planning to do e-waste recycling events, and we can talk more about that later. There's $1,000 provided by Council Member Kalos for an urban planner or technical assistance, and then another 2,500 provided by Councilmember Levine to support community outreach. My request, I don't know, Ebenezer, how we file, if we in the past have filed a formal application, I suggest we do this. And my request to the chairs of the various committees, if you have specific needs that us having funding from the council will help you with, for example, Wayne, if, I know y'all had talked about getting some sort of software at one point. If you have any price information that you can give, but I think that we can put in a request to both our council members, as well as the Manhattan delegation, as well as, other initiatives in the city. And I would need, we would need that feedback as soon as people can provide it. The second thing I wanted to mention, another request to committee chairs, is that there are a lot of funding opportunities that may not make it to community organizations, businesses, et cetera, who can benefit from those funding opportunities. So one of the things I would like to do is us also be a way to communicate those opportunities to our community. So to the extent, and I'm happy to take that on, to the extent that you find out or hear of grants and that kind of stuff, if we could sort of try and consolidate those into a database or a file or something that we can then forward to relevant, people that might have interest. So that's my 2 cents.
Domingo.
And Ebenezer, do we file that application every year for discretionary funding?
No, we do not.
Okay, we should.
The
There are-
deadline, if I may, is coming up pretty soon, so please
Yep,
try
it's
to
the
fill out as
22nd.
soon as possible, at least the 22nd.
Yes.
You have
It's
to.
not a complex form. There's a lot of things that you have to fill out in terms of the organization that should be boilerplate, but the use of funds is, there's not a whole lot of room in the application. I looked through it, the other night, so we can pull that off, and I think that we should pull this off. So I'm trying to figure out how we can make that a priority and something that time is devoted to basically the next week, because Tuesday's the deadline.
Domingo, you have a question.
I actually have a recommendation for the treasurer. Being that we have to chair committees and deal with agendas, etc., minutes, I want to recommend for the treasurer to be able to put in, create some sort of Google form where they send it over to us, and it'll be easier for them to compile, because that's a good way for us to be able to share with the committee as well and engage the members of the committee. Have a conversation around the importance of tapping into these funds and areas that we could, as a committee, recommend to be able to use these funds to better our community. So I think it could, I would recommend that the treasurer do it and be able to compile that.
Happy to.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Steve.
Yeah, Sally, you just ticked off that that these allocations that we received for the current fiscal year were for community outreach, for translation services, for an urban planner. Did we actually use the money for any of those purposes?
No, those funds are right now sitting in our account, not to be used, and we have until June 30th to use them. So for example, with health and environment, basically it's scheduling those events for, Wayne, I don't know if you have a specific need. And then for outreach, we had talked in past meetings in terms of maybe hiring people who can do flyering in our community, because not everyone's on social media, or can, someone who could maybe, if the licensing committee needs it, someone who could, go around to businesses and make sure they post their notices. I mean, there's a way that we can actually bring money to youth in our community by paying them to do some of that kind of flyering and checking. So, but no, the money has not been used.
Yeah, Steve, to answer your question, Catherine, why don't you just go ahead and discuss the plan that we've trying to come up with.
Yeah, no, so as promised, I did a quick breakdown about just specifically the $2,500 for community outreach. It was not my best timing, but let me just pull it up and I'll share the screen. In the meantime, I wanted to ask Sally something. Oh, and I think in addition to the committee points, because it could be a sizable amount, we can add some of these ideas into that if it allows for that. Sorry, give me 1 second. I got too many windows open from my drive. All right, so essentially what I did was compile, sorry, actually, Sally, did you want to add anything else before I just kind of talked about the $2,500?
And no, I would love to listen to you for a while.
Okay. Where'd it go? Sorry. All right, here we go. Let me share screen, pick the right window. All right. So we should all be able to see this. So essentially I kind of just did a breakdown for transparency. That way folks know where the money came from to and for what. Let me lower my hand because it's distracting. Okay. So we have $2,500 one-time non-renewable. I'm going to kind of skip that part because I think us in the executive committee know it's broad from my understanding, right? It's community outreach and engagement. So the first project was around the stipends for community engagement. And essentially it's, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, y'all. It's for targeted engagement of sectors in our community. Some of the ones that have been, and there's crossover, of course, right? So seniors, Spanish-speaking adults, which obviously crosses there, but we can kind of tailor that in terms of an age range or even a sector within the district. Youth engagement, 16 to 25, young adults. Residents of Southern Washington Heights has been said frequently. We often get members of the public who come from Inwood, but not other areas. And then residents, in particularly, I think when it comes up for us in key moments, specific residential areas. So if it's the Brownfield cleanups, constructions, fire or building projects that, maybe take place all along Post Avenue. And, FDNY is going to come in. So really kind of like, what would be the word? But specific to certain events. We're not able to hire staff, but we can. Stipends are allowable. And where I have put kind of like my own 2 cents is that, peer models work in many interventions and in many sectors. And so we know that if we contract or stipend people who reflect the populations that we want to reach, then we can see success, right? And then we can engage. And depending on what our ultimate goals are, when we kind of get to the granular, right? It might be that we're going to have high turnout, and we spoke about that earlier. We're going to have folks who never knew about the community board and maybe our first time attendees. And in general, our board business actually improves. So kind of like an idea of how it can work. One, we would have to contract because it's very low money, right? Like this is not a lot of money. We don't necessarily have robust funding to support a potential project like that, is being able to bring in people who are already experienced in it, right? Who are going to have really designated spaces to do outreach and engagement. And so that's something that where we would come in and it would be kind of collaborative in terms of, public spaces, small businesses, spaces of faith, key areas. So this would be mapped out. It's not going to be like, oh, I just feel like doing outreach in this area. These peers, I'm going to just call them peers for a lack of a word. We can figure out something else, or actually, no, I hate calling it peers. Let's just talk about people. So these people who would do outreach would be engaging in brief conversations, right? So, what's the community board? What's the key thing that we're working on or promoting, how they can attend and how they can keep in touch with us, right? We are not trying to bring in 3-4 hour conversations with folks on the street or wherever we're at. Really short so we can reach as many people as we can. And then this is something that people would have to be trained in. How do we track? All the work would be measurable. So through the Zoom reporting, we'll know, right? Because everybody registers when they join. There's the listserv signups that can grow, or the Facebook. And then, of course, there's all of the data that you can all share in terms of people who come into the board meeting and anecdotes and things like that. There's a couple of things that come with that, though, right? So to be able to pay for this, people have to register as vendors, is my understanding, right? Any individuals that the board pays have to be vendors in the city system. It's not a complicated system or process, but it does require hand holding. Here's just a quick idea, right? To have something that's an initiative that's uninterrupted, is that because it's only $2,500, then it can really only be a 4-week cycle if we want 5 people. If we want 1 person or 2 people or 3 people, but usually for engagement work, odd numbers work well. We want to be able to do that. So that's just a kind of like a quick breaking down of the math. I personally put my 2 cents here in terms of like pay rate. Outreach engagement is key. When we bring in people who are stakeholders, we need to pay for their expertise, for hitting the streets, for talking to people and doing the uplifting work of this volunteer body. So as a proposal, $20 an hour, living wage, part of our value systems, debatable. What are challenges though, as y'all can hear? We're all volunteers, right? And so there's additional time for recruitment, right? So what that recruitment process can look like. Some thoughts that I have had that other folks, and I think it was boards in the Bronx, did somewhat similar but different, is contracting an agency, or, you know, I know sometimes we've done that in the past. Personally, I didn't add that in here only because there's not an organization, to my knowledge, that has peer programs that are broadly based. But that could be, you know, kind of like a caveat, right? Like if we only want seniors, then maybe we contract the senior center that will employ seniors and they pay them. So I just wanted to share that. I didn't write that down here because, you know, that's something that we kind of have to identify organizations for. But again, right, like a stipend program is a lot of work. We have to recruit, we have to create that process, we have to onboard, we have to train, we have to track and supervise. Albeit it's only a month, but it is work. There are a lot of strengths and opportunities in that these are also folks based on their experience that would have
time.
Okay. So I mean,
Kathleen, I just want to add
You have
2
a question, yeah.
I want to add 2 points to that. One is that we actually have up to 7,500. I know that in our board reports, I wasn't around for them, but it said that Udonis's 5,000 was for translation services. In fact, it's not designated. It is also for programming and outreach and that kind of stuff. So if this is an idea that people want, it could actually be a bigger program. I actually like the idea of, you know, if a 16-year-old is actually qualified to serve on the community board, I would like to see if there's a way that we could use these funds to recruit high school students that need employment or would like employment or internships or whatever. These could be intern stipends from our local high schools. I also like the idea when this money ends, whether or not the community board could explore getting some of the free summer youth employment program kids to help us to continue this once we don't have the funding. But we do have more funding that could be allocated. I'm not sure if when it was changed in our reports that Udonis's money was for translation, there was actually a plan to use that for translation services. The big thing though is expense money only lasts for a year. So we have to make decisions fairly quickly so we can make sure that we're not giving money back to the city.
Yeah. All right. So I have a few other questions, Catherine. We will continue to use whatever money is available to us for translation services. That's beyond question here. So Liz Ritter, I don't know who's first.
Thanks. There are a couple of organizations that I think, already exist and that may be able to tap into a volunteer network. I love the idea of paying people a living wage. I think that's really appropriate. So yay for $20 an hour. But Fresh Youth Initiatives, has, a network of local, some middle school, but also high school kids, peer leaders. It's an established organization, and they have, like an internship. So that's maybe something that we could tap into. I know that I suspect, Mary, you could probably offer some input on this, but through Fern and YCOA, we've got like a senior network. So there are a couple of different, particularly for those two demographics, we could, I suspect, get some solid volunteers, and that could be, I think, really helpful.
Domingo.
Yeah, I would like to reach out to, for instance, I got 2 points. Youth work is very difficult, Sally. So it's like, one thing that we've noticed over the years is the trends of youth coming into the board and eventually phasing out or leaving. And it's because the board doesn't necessarily have an intentional space to be able to foster youth to be welcomed into. So that's something to consider when we want to put youth and engage them in the board. Another organization that has done great work with peer-to-peer work and it's like probably one of the best organizations doing youth work is Brotherhood Sister Soul, and they're right there. They're a few blocks away from us. So I think that's something to consider, because I do think that if we're gonna do this intentionally, we have to bring people that are already doing this work and already excelling in this work. And I think
I agree.
Brotherhood Sister Soul is testament to an organization that came out of our, well, not necessarily our community. They're a little bit south from us, but they've been able to excel in youth work.
Yep, I wouldn't even mind spending, bending the ear of Al Curland, who Faye had at the meeting, because he's done a lot of work with empowering youth, to sort of be leaders. And so he might be able to have a couple ideas of how we could reach out to certain groups that are also very engaged in that work.
Okay, Marielle, and if anyone else besides Marielle, which is going to be the last comment, wants to cooperate, coordinate, or collaborate, we'll have each other's numbers and email addresses. We can do this offline. So Marielle, go right ahead.
Yes,
That'll be the last comment on this.
Thank you, Catherine. It definitely seems like you've put in a lot of thought into this. So thank you for your work on it so far. Definitely we'll connect with you offline to see if I can support in any way. But just one thing that I noticed I was a little bit absent in terms of the targeted demographics. It's people with disabilities, which unfortunately is a group that's almost always left out in a lot of these spaces. And I think we need to be a lot more intentional about including them. A quick thought on name. I think in these types of things, empowering names, things like community ambassadors or, something to that nature, people would might appreciate. And then lastly, did I understand correctly that these funds need to be used by the end of June?
Yes.
Okay. So my only concern is, if that's the case, one, obviously time, but secondly, let's say that, despite the time challenges, we're able to get everyone on board and they start, hitting the streets April, May, they have these conversations, great. But then we go on summer break. And so there's an issue of, maybe in those initial discussions in April and May, the people that they're reaching out to are beginning to participate in our meetings, but then the summer break, and then what happens? So I think the suggestion, I think was Sally, about the summer youth employment could be a great way to sustain it, which is really important. Again, I'll kind of touch base with you offline on other points, but those are the main points that I wanted everyone to hear. Thanks.
Right.
Thank
Good.
you. And
So-
if we could be in touch, I would really appreciate.
Please, just do offline communication. I'd like to get the secretary's report, please.
I look a mess. I've been away from my apartment for a week, and I left the window open, so I'm freezing right now. I would be
Call 311.
very. What was that?
Call 311 on yourself.
Well, my heater is now just starting to heat back up. So I have just a few things to not really report on, but just to get some guidance on best practices, because I'm obviously the new secretary. So one thing is, I noticed that after the general body meeting last month, I received an email from Cedro and to the office initially, and then the office sent it to me about the friendly amendments at the general body meetings. So I wanted to just get some clarity and understand what the best practice is, and if it's helpful to have that documented, because I don't start working on the minutes immediately. So a lot of the times I may miss the friendly amendment. When I served as chair, I took down the amendments and revised the resolution and sent to the office, so I had it. So I don't know what the standard should be. So that's just a topic for all the chairs, just to kind of give me your opinion on what is best. Obviously more work to track all the friendly amendments in real time, and then to liaise with you all to get the resolutions finalized. I didn't think that was a part of the responsibility, but we can have a general conversation about that as a best practice. So in the second point I would like to propose, just to get clarification on the best practice, is I received an email once again from a chair, Daryl Cochran, and then the assistant Marielle also emailed about the vote count after the meeting. I send the vote count within 24 hours to the office, which I did last month. And historically speaking, when I needed that information, I would contact the office directly. They reached out to me and I didn't respond because my emails are overwhelming. I don't know if that is a standard practice, if that was just not communicated to Daryl as a new chair. But my information, the attendance and the vote counts, it gets sent to the office immediately. So it's my expectation that they would be, if any chair should contact the office instead of contacting me. I'm happy to share that with you all in the event that you want an urgent vote count, which I've done that with people. But I think it may be a better practice if you formalize the process and email the office and CC me for that information. But if you need it that night, you can also just text me or call me. So I want to just put that out there and get some feedback from the chairs on that. And the third thing is, we've had issues with committee attendance in the past. I don't know how you expect me, if you want me to track that. If that is the case, I need access to the documents from the office. I don't have that yet. So in my documentation for the month of January, I don't have access to all the committee attendance. So maybe there's a standard process. We can talk offline, the chair, myself, and whoever else needs to be involved, Ebenezer, on how you want me to be involved in the tracking of the committee attendance as well. That's all I have. Those are more comments to you all and questions to get an understanding of what the best practice should be and how we can standardize this process so I can do the job that I have been hired to do. So that's it.
Before I get to Isidro, who has a question, I'd like to point out that yes, you and Ebenezer should really get together and come up with some sort of formality and send out that letter saying to all the chairs exactly how would the process should be moving forward.
Okay,
So
got it. If you want me to come up with the process, I'm happy to do that. But I will do that. I'll do it tomorrow.
Mr. Medina.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Curtis. Because the license committee items are time sensitive, perhaps we should find a way that if I have some issues, we should have a clear way to communicate and forward the information to Ebenezer as soon as we can. Grateful for your assistance and also Liz, who submitted a friendly amendment. But I think because of the sensitivity of our licenses, we should streamline and take care of that as soon as we can. Ebenezer might also chime in if he can.
Cool.
Sevis.
I got a recommendation as far as like when it comes to potentially when the assistant secretary is appointed or voted on, potentially just having the assistant chair, the assistant secretary monitor the friendly amendments and compile them. So like that, it could alleviate you, Curtis.
Got it. That makes sense. And I have nothing to do with the actual resolutions because I don't have the original doc files, but I'm happy to find a way to work with the assistant to track the friendly amendments and then email them out to you all the next day. So you all can then insert that language into the original documentation and send that back to the office. So I hopefully will have an assistant chair to assist with that, but I'm happy to take that on as well.
Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, it never even occurred to me that the secretary would be involved in friendly amendments. Like I sort of see that as the committee job. Like if I have the friendly that I accept on a resolution out of my committee, it's my job to get it to the office separately, but I could be wrong. And separately, I've never gotten a vote count after a meeting. It'd be sure seems like a relevant thing to know, particularly again for committees that have a resolution that was up. I also don't sort of see that as the secretary's job to put out to the board, but
Yeah.
it just seems like we could have a better flow of what's actually happening than we do.
At least has some clarification points on Debbie's questions, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit to Debbie's point and also to Curtis's questions. Obviously, how every secretary does it is different, but as someone who was the secretary 4 times for a total of about 10 or 11 years over the course of a quarter of a century, I viewed it, and my colleagues viewed it, as my job to get the vote count out. When we met in person, I usually tried to get the vote tally before the end of the meeting. When the meetings went very late, that was difficult to do. And of course, in a world of Zoom, it's a completely different thing. But I would get the vote count to the office either that day or the next day. And then as a courtesy, I would also let the chairs of each of the committees that had resolutions know what the vote tally was on their resolutions. And for licensing, I would just send them like a spreadsheet because it was just too much typing. In terms of amendments, that was always, it's the committee's resolution that's put on the floor. So it is the responsibility of the committee chair to keep track of amendments, friendly or otherwise, typographical errors, whatever, and to share that. It was not the secretary's job, so that should not be on you.
Sally.
Okay. So I think just to comment on that really quickly before we move on, I think what we can do is if there is someone who's like, we need an extra eye on the friendly amendments just to alert me, so I can respond, because a lot of the times I'm going back to review. So if there's an extra need or extra eye on the friendlies, I'm happy to listen closely and jot down that if there is a need. I know licensing gets a little crazy sometimes, so I can understand your need to see, Joe. So I'll make that offer to all the chairs moving forward, that just to let me know, ping me, text me to say, I need you to listen on any amendments and jot that down. I'll send it to you by email.
Yeah, it should really be the responsibility of the chairs who ask or request the friendly amendments to get it to you. You shouldn't be chasing them around, ambulance chasing him.
I'd like to ask you a
Steve Simon.
if I may, Chair, on this topic.
Steve Simon. I have 3 more questions on the floor before I move on.
Chair, I have a procedural question.
What was that?
I do have a procedural question.
I gotta get back to you because I had two more people ahead of you. Okay. Steve Simon, Daryl, and then you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. Are we?
I have my hand up too.
You've kept your hand up. You
I know.
never put it down.
Specifically addressing Curtis.
Okay, so you get to be last.
I just want to clarify something. I'm assuming that in the end, the friendly amendments are incorporated into the minutes. If the committee chairs are compiling the information, they are passing it on to the secretary, and it is reflected in the minutes. That's an important, seems to me that's an important part of the business of the meeting, is to indicate that resolutions have been amended.
Daryl.
Yeah, just real quick, going back to what Curtis said earlier. I just want to be clear. I know Marielle did email Curtis as well as the staff about the board vote, but I just want to put out there that the importance of it was because how the vote came out would determine the agenda for the following meeting. So we may not be done with our work on that issue. It's not like the issue's done. I just want to point that out. And I still, and maybe Marielle could correct, I still didn't see that information.
No, I haven't heard from anyone on it. Thanks.
Okay. I didn't email that. I think I did email that to you. Check your email again. I'll double check, but.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Sally, last question.
Yes, I agree with Steve that that has to be incorporated into the minutes. Specifically with the vote counts, I was one of the people that when we met in person would also try and hang around. So I would walk out knowing how, what the outcome of our votes was. That's part of the minutes, but we typically do not see it until the next month's meeting. So if there was a way that it could just be automatically after the meeting, when you finalize the vote count, if you could just send that piece of it out to the full board, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you. You got probably as many questions from a secretary's report as I've seen in a long time. It's good. So now we're gonna try and review March's and April meeting calendars. You guys want to take a look at them and see if we can approve them or make changes, so forth. Steve.
Yeah, in the March meeting, it shows a new board member's orientation on the 16th. Wouldn't it make more sense to do that in April after the new members are appointed?
And sometimes it's taken longer than April for the appointments to be made.
I don't trust that take. I just feel like for the past 4 months, we've gotten as many new board members as we've gotten in the previous 2 years. I think that it's overdue. And I think if we have to go back and do another orientation during the summer, we'll do it again. I just feel like there's about 8 to 12 new members, just fresh off of the page.
All right, but I think you can anticipate that with the new borough president, chances are that we're going to have some more new members.
There aren't that new appointments, really, Steve. There aren't that many new appointments.
Well, we don't know what he's going to do.
Okay, so I'll do that in March, and then I'll do another one whenever we have to. We just need to get this newer. Excuse me, let's just have one conversation at a time. I just feel like we need to get these new board members rolling. And we need to get them into a pace in which they can participate and know what they're doing, as Catherine said in the beginning, which you were not part of.
Okay.
You came in late. Debbie, if you still have your hand up still? Is that want to speak again or no? Liz then.
Yeah, I mean, Steve makes a valid point, but the reality is that Eleazar, you are 100% correct. We haven't had a new member orientation in a while. We got a bunch of new people, and I enthusiastically support having this kind of session sooner rather than later, and then doing it again if we need to. So thank you for that. Thank you both for that.
Thank you.
So are the chairs, are we going to make presentations at that orientation?
We all should.
All right, so we should expect to attend.
Yeah, you should.
Could we also include in that a quick summary of how the budget process works so that they can learn about it in March? And again, when it comes to the time when they have to do the rankings and stuff, that people can understand what they're doing.
Yeah, Wayne that did the last orientation was extremely thrilled about that. He included it as part of the orientation. He was the one that leaded it, so it is usually part of it. Be more than welcome to participate. So I have 4 more hands. So I'm gonna go Domingo, Mariel, and that would be it.
I spoken more than Mariel. Mariel, go ahead.
Thanks, Domingo. No, just a request if someone could forward me the calendars, please. Thank you.
I got you.
We're blocked.
Okay, so March 30th, Eliezer, I've been in communication with DA Bragg, Alvin Bragg. So we've confirmed the date of March 30th, 6:30, to do a public safety forum on breaking down the bail reform. I personally feel that our community needs to have more clarity on it. There's a lot of fake news roaming around. I've been looking at the stats. Only 4% of people who have been released on bail reforms actually get reincarcerated. And I think
You're on mute, Domingo. Your audio cut.
oh, sorry. I think it's important to educate folks on the what the bill reform is, and then just have a very objective conversation on what it is and be able to share stats. I would not be inviting any other elected official, as I don't want to politicize the event. I just want to make sure that he presents on what bill reform is.
So on back to subject on hand, review of March 22 and 20 and April 22, 2022. Who is changing or trying to suggest to make any changes to the agenda as is? Can we move forward, or you guys propose any changes on any dates? Do you have any conflicts with the
Yeah, I
dates?
just want to add March 30th. That's it.
Okay.
So, quick question. In the March agenda, it states that the orientation.
Domingo, can you please clarify what you want to add to March 30th?
I will email you, Ebenezer. Hopefully I get a response from you.
So going back to the orientation meeting, Eleazar, in the calendar, it specifically says it's an in-person meeting. Has that been determined that it's definitely in person and not virtual?
We're trying to, and Ebenezer, let me know if we confirmed to get the second floor, so it has more space and have more room in order to keep the protocols of the building, of the CDC. So are we confirmed with the date, Ebenezer? I believe we are.
All right, could we spell members S apostrophe, so it's clear that the meeting is for more than one member?
Who else is next? Sally?
No, I'm not.
Liz, right?
Yeah, just briefly, as much as I support the new member orientation, I think I'm gonna have to send Nobles, because in addition to it being the new member orientation, it's also the holiday of Purim, which starts in the evening. And while I don't think that's gonna affect any of the new members, so I don't wanna say don't have the meeting on that day. I just won't be able to make it. And if I can just jump the gun on April and say that it's awesome that this year, for the first time in a long time, Passover doesn't conflict with any of the meetings. So they're all good.
Beautiful, so we can move on. Angel?
Yeah, just a clarifying question as a new member of the executive committee. Is the expectation?
Angel, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
I was able to hear him.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It's a clarifying question as a new member of the executive committee. Are all members of the executive committee also expected to attend the new member orientation? Need to know from Liz. Okay. Just wanted clarification. Thank you.
I think it depends on like how they set it up. So like I remember at one point different people came in and spoke. So I think it's based on whoever's facilitating it.
Understood. Got it.
I think it may also depend on if you've attended a new members orientation. I think in COVID, you're not like a new member,
right?
But I don't know, you're new enough that have you attended a new member orientation? Then you should probably attend this one.
Good thinking, Liz. Thank you.
COVID just really messed with our mojo.
I mean, I came
ways.
in the middle, in the height of COVID, so yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so there's absolutely enthusiastic approval of these two calendars, so we're moving on to our committee reports. Francisco Lopez for the first report.
Yeah, give me a second. Hold on.
Chair, before we move on, a point of order. I think it behooves everyone that whoever's writing up the agenda on a monthly basis for the executive committee, that there'll be some type of order. It's not fair that I find myself in the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, the license committee presenting practically last or second to last. Not fair to me, not too fair to the rest of the committee members. So I like to see some type of order and consistency where committees will be highlighted or called in some type of order. I'm not going to stand and wait here on a monthly basis being last or second to last. It's not going to happen.
May I suggest that we do it like alphabetically, and then each month, the one that went first goes last, and then the one that went first goes last, and then throughout the calendar, since
Yeah,
they're and 10
listen,
months.
Listen, either way, yeah, I don't see that as an issue. Either way is okay. I know that a lot of people have been given the opportunity to go first, sometimes last. I don't know what the criteria has been. We can go alphabetically. It's not a problem. So
Pedro, you can go before me.
yeah, it's not a big deal. But
I don't think it should be alphabetical, because then the last person, the last name, whatever, is going to always be last. It has to be transitional, and it has to be rotated.
No, I mean, if we start alphabetically and then the first one goes last the next month, and then
let's not get into a discussion about the order. We've done it alphabetically. We've done it non-criteria wise to give people an opportunity to go last or first. It's always been that way. I've been here for 5 years, and no one has ever said that they felt that they were being treated for last. This is the first time I hear it. So maybe in the past, I don't know. Can't talk about the past. But anyway.
Rest assured, Chair, that I would not stand for this. This will be the last time that I'll go last, second to last.
The office will continue to do it in the way that they feel as though it has to be done. And let me just finish my point here. So we'll continue on. If it is a conversation that you want to have offline, I'll be more than happy to. So, Francisco, you ready for your report?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we good evening, guys. We continued the conversation on cannabis again, and for the month of February, focusing on our guys in the street. The guys that have been criminalized, have been targeted, who've been selling weed on the corners for 20 years. We working on helping those guys get into the legal market. We had a lawyer from New Jersey who's very familiar with New York law. We had a dispensary owner from Oakland to chime in on his experiences as a dispensary owner in California and some of the things to avoid, which was very helpful for all those that were on the call. We also had Washington Heights Inwood Development Corporation representative Leslie Mendez, who spoke about possible business plans and some of the resources that they have available for our community members. And we also had Safida, who is a part of the National Cannabis Party. Yes, that is a political cannabis party out of New York. They came to our board to speak on some of the initiatives and agendas that they got coming up this year, because we all believe that if you're going to get into the cannabis industry, you must be an advocate, especially if you are Black or brown. Anything else, please look at the minutes that should be available immediately. Other than that, thank you, Domingo, per usual, for helping me put all this together. And any questions, I'm available. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Francisco, thank you. Domingo Esteves.
I actually wasn't able to attend this meeting due to a business situation I had, but Barbara facilitated the meeting. She actually was kind enough to facilitate the meeting. She spoke with the precinct, the fire. I know that she had a lot of probing questions around a lot of the fires to the FDNY. But I will refer folks to the minutes to be able to, when the minutes are released, to be able to reference the meeting. March 30th. So in our next month's meeting, we'll be focusing on planning our March 30th event with DA Bragg, a forum on public safety and combating the misinformations, or just being able to bring clarity to a topic that has a lot of contention at the moment. So besides that, if individuals want to participate, they're welcome to attend next month's meeting, and look forward to seeing you then.
I was at the meeting. There were a lot of great questions. I did have one question for you, Domingo.
Can you wait until
Yeah.
see if there was a person ahead of you?
Okay, sorry.
There's none? Okay, sorry about that. Sally?
Yeah, my question, at the beginning of the meeting, Barbara indicated that you were stepping down as chair of public safety. Is that the case, or is it not?
I haven't sent Eliezer anything yet. I think, yeah, it might have been a misunderstanding, I guess. But again, I'll be chairing the meeting next month, and we'll be facilitating the event at the end of the month.
Okay, yeah, there was a lot of confusion then. Thank you.
That was fast. Wayne.
Thank you, Eliezer. So we had a number of topics discussed at the February Land Use Committee. The Hispanic Society, which actually came to CB12 in 2019 to talk about its master plan for implementing a variety of improvements, came back to us for the current phase, which deals with certain temporary accessibility upgrades, a signage project, and some rooftop bulkhead and equipment. Since the complex is both in a city historic district as well as a national register district, anything that's visible, actually anything that's done there, has to be approved by landmarks. We're very encouraged with their commitment to continuing to improve the accessibility. If you've been to Audubon Terrace, those buildings which are all over 100 years old, there are so many steps up and down just to get into the terrace. And once you're in the buildings, there are steps up and down. So the temporary work, and when we say temporary, it's going to be in place for 5 to 10 years, will allow you to get wheelchair access from the sidewalk all the way into the central terrace, which is impossible at the moment. And there are additional elevators that are being added to some of the buildings. So when this is all done, you will have ADA compliant buildings, but this is temporary work to allow access while that work goes on, to also allow the public to continue to enjoy those arts and culture buildings. And there was a resolution passed by land use that'll be presented to the full board for ratification. We were introduced to our new city planning liaison, Olivia Olmos. She actually comes from the West Coast and is coming up to speed with some of the planning issues that we've discussed in Community Board 12. And I pointed out, similar to the discussion we just had about new member orientation, there are sort of land use 101 training that is sometimes provided by the borough president's office. In the past, we've had either the borough president or city planning come to give it to the land use committee individually. We haven't done that in a while, and I think it's important for us to, as a committee, and those who are not on the committee who can attend, to have some updates on what those requirements are. As items of new business, we discussed two things. There were a number of community residents who were actually referred to me by Liz Ritter. They were concerned with the proposed project at 205, 207 Cabrini Boulevard. That's a site that's across from Castle Village. It's basically on the same side of the street with Hudson View Gardens. And they were concerned, the site is covered with Manhattan schist, and they're concerned with the vibrations and how that impacts the adjacent buildings. But more importantly, the project was proceeding, with certain violations. And I think the prior owner had violations. the current owner continued to proceed with violations, and I told them that they really needed to get in touch with Ebenezer to make sure that the district manager can contact the building department and make it clear to the building department that we're concerned with any work that is proceeding without either proper permits or in violation of site safety protocols. I believe Ebenezer also will discuss that at the district service cabinet meeting. And then finally, Congressman Espaillat's office reached out to me with a resolution honoring the Harlem Renaissance as part of Black History Month that they wanted, some review and comment on. I asked for some additional time so that the Land Use Committee could also take a look at that. The Congressman office pointed out that it was not a formal request for, community board input, but, they did allow us some time, and we gave them a bunch of edits to the document, which I believe was intended to be introduced on February 9th to the Congress. And that is what we covered in land use this month. Any questions, comments? Offers for a vodka tonic.
Can't help you on the vodka tonic, but
I've got that covered. It's okay.
Thank you very much, Wayne, for fielding that that inquiry from the public. I really didn't know what to do with it, and you are the reigning expert, so I appreciate your making room for that.
Not a problem.
My dear friend, Mary Anderson, you've been awfully quiet today. It's your time to speak. Unmute yourself. Maybe that's the reason why.
Sorry, forgot to unmute.
There you go.
As I was saying, I'm tired. I'm very, very tired. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm just exhausted. But functioning. Here I am. Our last meeting, once again, a presenter that was supposed to do a presentation for us was unable to attend the meeting, but we did have the FDNY at our meeting, and we had a very lengthy presentation and discussion, lots of Q&As, and so, it was well received, and I think needed. We needed an update on a lot of things that they reminded us of. Our next meeting is going to be on March 3rd, and we will have the an ADA from the DA's office to present on elder abuse. I will not be at the March executive meeting, and I will not be able to be at the new member board, the new board member orientation. I will be out of the country for 2 weeks. I will check with my committee. I will be here for the aging committee, but and I will see if anyone would be willing to be at the board member orientation, and someone will be, probably Richard, will cover the executive committee. But we'll finalize that, and I will.
You can tie in.
Let you know.
From whatever you are, you can join us via Zoom if you want to stay. If you want to be that bad, right?
As I told Ebenezer, it's okay.
Have fun, Mary. Disconnect.
Bring back some warm weather.
I'm going to my usual hangout, except only for 2 weeks this year.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary. Thank you once again. It's Steve Simon. Up next.
The latest COVID-19 statistics are show a significant improvement in terms of our positivity rates in all 4 zip codes, under 2%, in zip code 40, under 1%. So we have had in the week ending February the 12th, there were about over 90 new cases, but that's significantly less than what we've experienced lately. But meanwhile, though, since our our full board meeting, there have been 912 new cases, 21 new deaths. So we now have a total since the beginning of the pandemic of 46,520 cases, 907 deaths in the Washington Heights and Inwood. Zip code 32 is now over 80% in terms of people who've been vaccinated with at least one dose, and they're over 71% with people who have been fully vaccinated. All four zip codes are over 75% on people who have been vaccinated with at least one dose, and the other three zip codes are at least they're all over 65% in terms of people who are totally vaccinated. All four zip codes have over 70% of adults who have been fully vaccinated. But again, we're lagging behind the rest of Manhattan and the rest of the city. So in view of the fact that zip code 34 has the lowest vaccination rates in our district, I have arranged with Assembly Member Taylor's office to have a mobile van which will provide both testing and vaccines located at outside of the Good Shepherd Church at Broadway and Isham Street. Dr. Karen Thornton, who has been traveling around in Northern Manhattan providing this service, and I believe is an Inwood resident, has agreed to station her van at that location. She's been there since Monday. She plans to be there from 10 to 4, and at this point has no end date. She's agreed to be there at this point, I think, indefinitely. And I've spoken to Eli about this, so we are co-sponsoring this COVID-19 testing and vaccine van with the Assembly Member's office. I'll be forwarding a flyer to Ebenezer so that we can blast it out. And Ebenezer, I would ask you to send it out every day until as long as that van is located there. At our meeting, besides having a full discussion again about COVID-19, we also had a discussion about the city's composting efforts and its plans to try to gradually reinstate full composting in residential areas. We've agreed to work with the sanitation department to encourage more people in our area to request the composting. Apparently thousands of people have, but we haven't quite hit the threshold so that sanitation can begin regular pickups. So we're hoping to achieve that shortly. Isabel, a representative from Isabella again spoke. They're concerned about a provision in the governor's proposed state budget that limits the number of Medicaid plans in each region. So they may be, I believe they're going to be asking us to pass a resolution on the subject. So that probably will be coming before us at our next meeting. We have, and I want to discuss this in the context of what Sally has suggested in terms of funding that we can request. We've had two Brownfield cleanup plans submitted to us in the last few weeks. These are plans that go on for hundreds of pages and contain a lot of technical data. And if we're going to request money for certain things that would support the work of the board, I would think we could also ask for money for a consultant or somebody who can help us evaluate these plans. And it's a major burden and it's very difficult to go through them. And I believe it would be very helpful to us and give us a better handle on how to respond to them when the state DEC solicits comments. So I would ask that we be able to do that as well. And lastly, I'm wondering, I don't know if we discussed this earlier in the meeting, are we doing extensive outreach for the fire safety workshop on the 24th?
We should come up with a plan. That Catherine was just mentioning some of the ideas that we are coming up with.
Well, I think I wish we had those people doing the outreach work now, because this is something that would certainly be very helpful to our community. So whatever we can do, has the fire department given us a flyer? Do we have something that we're sending out to have people join that meeting?
Yeah, we should at least print about 500 of them and distribute them out. Like Catherine and Domingo and a few others were referring to bringing people in, offering stipends. A few organizations around the area that can help us with that.
If we have a flyer, I'm happy to do some posting of it. And I just want to remind people that while there's the whole issue of not being able to post flyers on like lamp posts, we're a public agency, and public agencies and elected officials are legally entitled to post these things like on lamp posts. So, you know, if each board member, we need to do more than just us, but if each board member can take a few copies and post it around their buildings, that'll go a long way.
Yeah, well, again, I would ask that we blast this out every single day until the 24th. It's important enough to get this message out, and also send it to our board members with the message that Liz just conveyed, that each board member should take it upon themselves to pass out these flyers. The number of flyers.
Three questions on the floor, or three comments. I don't know which one they are. Domingo, Sally, Isidro.
Okay.
Isidro, you go first since you haven't said much.
Thank you so much. And Steve and Liz, you are quite right. If it's a city agency, the city or nobody else should remove those flyers. So from a big perspective, I can post those flyers up around the the commercial corridor of 181. So I will have the staff post those flyers around 181 because there's a lot of foot traffic around there, and I think our community will benefit from that.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. That was really good. Sally and Domingo.
Yes, I was the new council member for Corey Johnson's district, which is Community Board 4. He did a really effective fire safety presentation for his district and anyone like me who wanted to attend. A lot of good questions came up. So if anyone who's putting that together wants some input on, how the questions we might want to have answers to, and maybe alert the FDNY to come prepared, I'm happy to talk to someone. But
You mean Eric Botcher, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, he's amazing.
Okay, Domingo, last.
Yeah, I also spoke to the FDNY rep, Steve. I'll be distributing it to the schools. I already have spoken to the superintendent's office, so they're going to use it to blast out all the parent associations. So I'll be working on that.
Just make sure we have one in Spanish, translated copy.
Right. Well, will we have a translator for this fire safety workshop?
I think we should if we're going to be inviting school parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's spend our money on the translation services.
Okay, yep. Steve, quick question on the total number of city deaths. What is our out of the total number of COVID related deaths? What's our relation to those deaths from the Washington Heights area?
Hold on a moment. Okay, I don't have the figures. I have the figures for the state. I'll get back to you.
Okay, all right, good enough. Thanks, Steve.
By the end of the meeting, I'll get back to you.
Thanks, Marielle.
Yes, hi everyone. Yes, so we had a really good meeting earlier this month. I think a lot of really good conversations came out of our committee meeting. In particular, I think we had shared this in the January meeting as well. Sorry, can someone mute themselves, please? And so we spoke about, I think some of you are aware, there was a kind of an ongoing conversation in one of the Facebook groups of an individual kind of requesting resources and asking for money because the individual was homeless. And it kind of, you know, there was a whole conversation about, oh, well, there are these services in the community and try this and try that. And so we have picked that up in terms of, you know, what are some things that we can do better as a community board. And we started talking about, one, updating the resource document that currently exists on our website. It is a little outdated, but also making it more accessible, recognizing again that not the average community person does not know about the community board and wouldn't know that such a document exists. And so that's one thing that the committee is taking up. But I think more importantly, and even more exciting, was a discussion around creating an interactive online platform that would allow people to almost filter through different resources that exist, whether they're looking for, you know, shelters, whether they're looking for things related to food, you know, social services, so on and so forth. And this would be a much wider project, much wider than Community Board 12. And so the committee is working on putting together a resolution for the Manhattan Borough President to take this on. There was a discussion that the Manhattan Borough President does have some funding to kind of do these types of things and kind of is a little bit more forward thinking when it comes to these types of resources. So if you're familiar with like BoardStat and those types of platforms, that's kind of what we're looking for. Secondly, we also had a really good conversation, I think also stemming out of that initial conversation about, you know, preventative services, was to host is to host a resource fair. And this is something that we're thinking about doing in kind of late spring. Again, focus more so on preventative services. So what are the services that people need before they fall into homelessness? Let's not wait for them to become homeless to reach out and help. And so that, you know, all of the committee members, we're all doing some brainstorming on some of the different community-based organizations and social services that we can invite to such an event. We also briefly spoke about the Armory Foundation. If you recall, one of the items of the resolution is to host a forum, bringing together all parties. And so that's something that we're working on to, again, bring together all parties to host a constructive conversation about how we can take that forward and ensure that, you know, all voices are heard. In terms of a forward look, again, kind of continuing to work on those bits and pieces, but also I would like to resurface some work that initially started in the late fall or winter regarding really making our community board a bit more sustainable in how we do things. And I know, Steve, you were involved in that conversation and Eliasad, so I'll be following up to see if we can pick that conversation up off the ground again. And if anyone's interested in being involved, please do let me know and would love to loop you into that conversation. Thanks.
Don't leave just yet. I'll have Catherine and Domingo Steps.
Yep.
Hi, thanks, Mario. In regards to the resolution with the resources, there are tools that already exist. And I've been like, as you were talking, for the life of me, I cannot remember the name, but they are a tech startup out of Chicago. And it's a portal, and it's actually one of the best ones I've ever used in that, because they actually work to maintain it. And so they have this whole process in confirming, you know, all the services and referrals and resources. And I'm going to, I'm going to find a way to remember the name of it. But it's just to say that, you know, I feel like I don't want us to replicate the wheel. This is a tool that even New York Presbyterian uses when they were doing the social determinant of health project. And so they used it specifically post-pandemic around mental health, domestic violence, and food pantries. The cool thing too, and I might just share this as well, is that perhaps it's about making these tools accessible to community boards, and that the board office, MBPO's office, pays for it. Because one of the great things about that tool that I used, it's an app, it's a portal, and you can literally from your screen text somebody. Let's say like Paola's in the office and somebody asks for something, she can text it and pick the language of the resource the person is looking for. I'm going to share that, but I think that's important to know.
Yes, please do share that once you have that information. And again, the resolution is really kind of for the MBPO to own the process and of course pay for it. That's because it's much wider than just our community board. It's, for all of Manhattan. And hopefully, if it goes well, maybe using such a platform as you suggested can be something that can be replicated citywide. Obviously, that'll take years, but let's start first with where we're at. But thank you for that.
Go then, Debbie.
Yes, if you want to expand it to like a community fair, I know FDNY wants to give out fire and carbon monoxide alarms. So we'd be able to bring additional resources. Francisco came up with a good idea in one of our meetings regarding potentially figuring out ways of being able to get a fire extinguishers. They might be a little too expensive, but there's also other alternatives that function similar to a fire extinguisher, which is actually reasonably cost at a reasonable cost. I'm gonna share that with the board in regards to potentially like buying an excess of those and us having events where we give them out for free to our community because we understand fire disease.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely see us linking up there. Thanks.
Good, Debbie, Steve.
I would just say, because I spend my whole day with this, like in an intense way of getting people to the resources they need. And obviously, I know you know this, but like the city already has a system, and that's like 311 and all of that. But I think that the value we add, and I know this is where you're going with it, is that there's the city services, and then there's all the CBOs and not-for-profits and stuff like that. So it would be nice to get like a more holistic picture at a district level for, where people go, again, it's not hard. There's a place to go when you're trying to get to the right place within the city structure. But for things like case management and social work and whatever, there's all sorts of organizations that might have a piece depending on the topic. And it would be great to have something that sort of rolled in, the youth programs, the people, offering like free legal services, et cetera, and anything that applies to residents in our district so that it's all fit together, not just, the government, which, is sort of already covered. Because then you end up researching and reinventing the wheel each time. So I think this could be helpful to bring in the institutions that aren't a city agency and programs and all that stuff.
Thanks so much, Debbie. That's exactly the approach we're going for. And I think more importantly, demystifying it, because it's incredibly confusing for someone who's in a stressful situation, going through these things. How can we want to make it easier for them to access these services that exist? Thanks. Steve?
Ebenezer, maybe you can recall this for me. I seem to remember that some years ago, maybe when George Fernandez was the chair of the board, I think we organized one or two of resource fairs. Isn't there something we've already done along these lines?
Yes, we did several resources fairs, one at United Palace. I believe we did one when Pamela was chair in another location. And there was a conflict that the people doesn't want that we meet with churches because the separation of government and churches. But yes, we did have several resources fairs in the community when Pamela was chair and George Fernandez as well.
All right, so maybe there's an outline or something that we can use, so we don't have to go back to square one. There's something we can build from.
Great, no, thank you for that. I'll reach out, Ebenezer.
We should have at least a base a listing of different organizations that we can call upon. If I may, I'd like to be able to answer Eliezer's question about the deaths from COVID-19. Can I go ahead and do that now?
Yeah. Before I move on to the next Debbie's report.
Okay, so as of today, In the New York City, 39,416 deaths. 33,911 of them are confirmed. 5,505 are considered probable deaths leading from COVID-19. So we have 907 in Washington Heights and Inwood. So that comes down to a little over 2% of the deaths citywide.
Thank you. A lot of help. Thanks. Debbie, just like to move on with your report.
So, I'll let people get to the minutes when we publish them, but we had the DOT update on 181st Street busway. So that was sort of preliminary information on how have speeds increased or not, and sort of a place to capture feedback. This came on the heels of like what's called the Community Advisory Board, which was sort of a broader group presentation with like elected officials and other stakeholders. And so, yeah, there's preliminary data. There's, I guess sort of two concern areas that have come up. There's various feedback on some sort of more fine-grained stuff that I'll leave aside, but it's sort of impact on small business owners or business owners along the corridor, and is one big issue. And then the second is, everybody's been watching, like you expect some spillover on adjacent streets. And so there's data on what's happening or not happening, except the fact that apparently like there's missing data set for north of the busway. Like they don't have the data for, I don't know what happened to it for like pre-busway. So how fast things are moving on, let's say 182nd Street and 183rd Street now, but you have nothing to compare it to know if it's like better, worse, whatever. And yet those are the places that we've been hearing, like they're kind of, they're getting impacted. So there's not sort of a clear plan of how we can kind of get a better understanding, but it's an issue. Like we have to understand what's happening there because of any sort of reporting coming back is like the spillover is affecting to the north. Anyway, and then we had just some general updates by DOT and from MTA. And one thing just sort of upcoming, hopefully, is, I always say about 2/3 of the things that come to me from the community, either during our meetings or between meetings, actually relate to enforcement. So people who have an enforcement, something's not getting enforced, and they're like, change the street, and then it's really an enforcement issue. So, and something Curtis and I had talked about over time earlier in the pandemic when a lot of other things were blowing up. So it just sort of wasn't the top, sort of public safety thing. But I've just started a conversation with Domingo about like to have some sort of town hall, some sort of joint meeting between TNT and public safety together to be able to capture the feedback, which we're getting all over the district in certain spots. And then plus just some macro concerns about things that are not enforced. And this is myriad things. This is from placards to speeding to everything. But Domingo and I are just, we've just connected on this. Leo Jimenez, my assistant chair, is probably going to take point on this because it's something he had approached me about as well. So we'll look forward to sort of doing something in conjunction. As people may or may not know, there are other community boards where those two things are combined. Public safety and traffic are actually in one committee. And for the young people, traffic enforcement used to be part under DOT. It wasn't always under NYPD. So it's sort of a natural thing to do. We haven't sort of, So, stay tuned. I know Domingo has the Alvin Bragg thing, so it might need to be April, but stay tuned. Those hands for me are old hands.
No, I think Eli's muted and he's trying to talk, but we can't hear him.
That's a new hand for me.
I guess Liz is first. She's right.
Yeah, but Angel has spoken less than I have, so I'm going to let him go first.
Thank you, Liz. I want us to brainstorm something around what Debbie said, and it is maybe thinking about a bigger town hall around just enforcement issues in general, because I see that it comes up in traffic and transportation, it comes up in public safety, but it also comes up for us in licensing committee, right, Isidro? We have the two precincts come to our licensing committee, and they sit and they provide feedback on applicants. And so there's like a bigger theme here of enforcement issues around our neighborhood. I've also heard about noise issues from neighbors and that not necessarily on the community board, just from other neighbors. And so maybe there's a space for us to brainstorm really a bigger town hall around what enforcement looks like and what we would like to see in the form of enforcement, because it seems to be an issue that's prevalent, not just in your committee, Debbie, but sounds like public safety, but also comes up in the licensing committee too.
Yeah, agreed. I will say also one thing coming back to the traffic side that I don't think is the same case on what comes up in licensing, which is traffic enforcement is a different command. So it doesn't go up through the precinct command. It's separate. However, there is some streets enforcement that does rely on precinct. And that's something, yeah. Anyway, Liz?
Yeah, obviously enforcement is a huge issue with parks and cultural affairs as well, more on the park side than the cultural affairs side, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And we typically have a meeting in May with all of the key players between parks, the precinct, PEP, what have you. I hear you, Angel, on trying to make it a little bit broader, but the downside of having a very broad meeting is if a meeting is about too many things, it winds up being about nothing at all. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest kind of splitting that baby and focusing on the traffic enforcement, but keeping in mind, bringing licensing in and keeping in mind that there is that issue. And frankly, it's a business development issue as well, because if you're trying to run a small business and there's a traffic shit show outside of your business, that's not good for business. So I would keep it to the traffic enforcement, but viewed through multiple lenses. And I do also want to just tell Debbie something that she might not know, which is on this very board, traffic and public safety used to be the same committee, and we split them because there were so many capital issues related to infrastructure, maintenance, streets, roads, bridges, and the MTA. I'm not suggesting we put those two committees back, but as recently as the 90s, those were the same committee on this board.
That's interesting.
Just 2 seconds, Eli, just two seconds. I just want to say, yes, I do agree with Liz. It's traffic enforcement, right? That is the central topic, the central theme. And then that can address so many of the other issues, or it's all encompassing, right? Like it's a traffic enforcement problem that we're seeing. And then everyone can come in and kind of like bring up how traffic enforcement is affecting whatever it is that they care about, whether it be noise, whether it be double parking, whether it be, whatever it may be. But yes, I agree with Liz on traffic enforcement.
Good. Traffic enforcement, poor traffic planning, extremely poor, that only takes into consideration just one side of the spectrum, and necessarily just traffic and cars, but also the landscape that it affects every time that a decision is made, and the families that are affected and so forth. But I don't want to get into that. So Domingo, with respect to Debbie's, you have your hand up? So, Domingo. Yes, that was a mistake. Debbie, unless someone else has another questions.
Yeah, No, my thing was more around like, yeah, like indulging in this conversation of enforcement. I first want to be able to have a conversation of what enforcement means prior to engaging the community on enforcement, right? Some of the most atrocious things that happened in humanity were considered a law, right? So I think it's very important for us to do our homework prior to engaging in enforcement conversations. As to, I think what Eliezer said, being able to canvas the community and talk about planning, right? How do we engage our community in planning prior to enforcement, right? So like understanding that sometimes you want to make the whole world green, but our community is not green yet. So what are the steps we could take towards to make the transition seamless as opposed to imposed? And I think these are part of the conversations, because then the community is stuck with enforcement and then they're like, yo, but this is because they don't understand the process and they weren't properly engaged into that transition, right? So I just want to be like very clear on that, because sometimes often people's comfort weaponizes the state, and we have to be very understanding of what that means.
David, final comments? No? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for such an interesting conversation. And now, Isidro Medina, on behalf of Liz Ritter.
I think he took a little parlay.
Yeah, he was hungry. He was starving.
I was starving. Apologies. So Chair, quickly, on open restaurant, which is now going to be called permanent outside dining. It was taken over by DOT, whereas before was Consumer Affairs. And that's why you have not seen any applications for unclosed or enclosed sidewalk cafe for the last couple of years. And this new regulations with DOT is going to take effect on 2023. So there is a timeline now from DOT to let the merchants know about the new policies, new regulations. And I requested on the meeting that we had with DOT that the community boards be approached so that we will know about the new requirements for the outside dining. There'll be some issues with some of our merchants because most of the structures that we have presently, they're going to be eliminated because they'll be mostly all have to be like outdoors. So there has to be proper ventilation. And I know that in some of our community, there's some structures that don't comply with this requirement. Quickly, because I'm hungry, there were only 16 applications for licensing, most of which were approved after lengthy discussions. Some of the restaurants that came in, they were asking actually for the 30-day extension for the temporary licenses, where now restaurant can apply for a temporary license for 30 days, then after which there will be a renew every single month for 3 months or 90 days. And then the applicant will have, I believe it's 270 days to apply for the permanent one. I would write up the resolutions with specific requirements that we had for the merchants, those that were approved. And that's basically it. Any questions, please?
Wayne, Mariel, please.
Yes, Isidro, I think last year, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. So last year concerning the open restaurants, when we passed a resolution on this, the recommendation was for DOT to create a pilot program using its proposed new regulations and to test that and see how it works before going, all out with the program under those new regulations. Is that their intention, or are they saying these are our guidelines and, when it becomes effective, it's effective citywide and there's no pilot program to test them to see how they work?
So my understanding is that there will be no test pilot project. They will send out the regulations to all the stakeholders. The good thing about this is that unlike while we had the pandemic at the highest level, there were many city agencies doing inspection, and most restaurants felt uncomfortable because some inspectors say something and somebody else will come with something different. So this will be permanent, but there will not be permanent structure on the street. The project will be permanent, yes. The fee will be about $1,000, which is not prohibitive, and then the renewal will be about $500 every time that they renew.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, DOT is not allowing community boards of businesses an opportunity to comment on these rules and regs. They're saying this is it.
No, they will allow for municipality input, so they will have to come to the community board as before. Yes.
Yeah, that hasn't changed, and that was part of a resolution that was put forth in last year's boroughs board in reference to DOT not taking away our opinions, if you want to call it, authority or powers on that regard. So yeah, they're still gonna have to come through the process of the community boards. I had that in my mind to ask you, Isidro. Thank you, Wayne. Mariel is Steve.
Yes, thank you, Isidro. I just have a comment, and I've noticed over the last, particularly last couple of months, and I'm sure this is something that's been happening for quite some time, there seems to be an unfortunate precedence where some businesses are being attacked is not the word, but maybe kind of pinholed into issues that may be happening around the establishment that I think we've noticed in the licensing committee. So for instance, if a particular business, maybe it's not even open, and there may be kind of concerns about, well, this business should not open because this area, has a lot of noise, or this area has a lot of crime. And so it's a tricky balance, because of course, everyone should certainly bring their concerns to us. And I think us as the licensing committee, we then express those concerns to those business owners when kind of reviewing those applications and putting in, some measures in place so that they don't contribute to some of the problems that already exist. But I just wanted to kind of mention that, because I find it a little bit troubling that, again, there seems to be this precedence where issues that may be happening in the community, and in some cases the establishment isn't even open, are being kind of pinned on that particular place. And I think we just need to be mindful of that, while also recognizing the concerns of residents. So just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no set criteria other than, personal taste on what you just talked about. Liz Ritter.
Thank you. I have a general question and a specific one. The general question is there, it's not clear to me if this is a licensing thing or if this is a traffic and transportation thing, or a business development thing, but there seems to be a conflict. It's a little bit less in our board, but it's happening kind of citywide, between the real estate of a sidewalk, a restaurant, an outdoor shed, city bike, bike docks. And there's like a lot happening on sidewalks. And I don't know if there's a meaningful mechanism for community feedback when you have these things where different agencies are placing things on sidewalks that may conflict with each other. I'm not actually looking for an answer now. That's a little bit of a rhetorical question, but I wanted to kind of throw that out there as for your Isidro's, and as well as Francisco's and Debbie's consideration, because it's a little bit of an overlap of those three committees.
And thank you, Liz. I'd like to chime in into this. We would definitely review some of the concerns that specific communities within our community are facing. And when the restaurant comes to ask for a sidewalk cafe or a roadside cafe, we take into account traffic, congestion, to see if we're going to recommend that a particular road cafe be allowed or not. So we'll take all of that into consideration, because we know some specific trouble areas that have huge traffic concerns, and we'll most definitely take that into account.
Cool, thank you. The other question that I had was sort of, so in general, I know that your committee is very, very good about making sure that businesses have a good neighbor sign. And on the one hand, that's a good policy to have. On the other hand, it's never been really clear to me. It's kind of easy to ignore. Sure, they put up a good neighbor sign and the business can say, oh, we have a good neighbor sign, except nobody really reads it or pays attention to it. I mention this because at your last meeting, one of the agenda items was, as you know, a business that is across the street from my apartment and has made, certainly my life extremely difficult. And one of the things that you were, the attorney representing the business kept on saying, well, the business has a sign that says no double parking. And you were very insistent and said, no, it has to be a much bigger sign. I got to tell you, man, they put up a sign. It's huge. The letters are this big. And, I don't want to say that 3 days is a trend, but the last 3 days, there's been less double parking. So not sure how I feel about the business. Jury's still out on that. I got a week, but I'm here to say that particular insistence, that particular policy, your implementation of it has been, at least in the last 72 hours, helpful. So thank you for that. And hopefully this is a trend.
And we'll continue to monitor what we request from our merchants and operators. The Good Neighbor sign, I think, is very limited. It is something that the committee can work on to make sure that it's not only more visible, but it also be respected. And again, I'm really glad about your comments and input that you bring to the committee. And because you are one of us, you are one of our community members, I highly respect your input. And like any committee members that bring me in a complaint, I will definitely be listening to their concerns. Just like you have, I'll definitely keep an eye open on that particular. Like I said, on this particular merchant, I'm going to ask you to be responsible. If you run an operator, you have to come to meetings to answer questions.
You have two more questions, Steve and Domingo.
Well, first of all, gesundheit to you, Ellie. Cedro, I don't quite understand how the outdoor dining areas are going to work year round. If there are no structures to, how are people going to stay warm during the winter if they're going to be out in the open? How does this work?
And that is still an open question, because the city still has to address the propane gas to see how it's going to be built in or not. There's also a question about how permanent this will be, like you indicated, because apparently they want this structure to be removed if the city would like to do repaving. So I like to see how that's going to all intertwine. Because there are a lot of still open questions on how this is going to work, particularly when it has to deal with street maintenance.
Yeah, but even to have the propane, you'd have to have it next to every single table. I mean, it's and even then, it's not necessarily a comfortable experience to be sitting out there in what we have now, like 15-degree weather. I don't get it.
And also besides that, besides the weather factor, which I think is going to be a challenge, there has to be some type of uniformity. We have in the community too many sheds that are not attractive and are not up to standard.
Oh,
so
sure.
All of that has to be addressed at some point.
Yeah, but I can understand how this program could work, 6 months out of the year. I don't understand how it can work year round.
Debbie?
Just coming back to Liz's initial
I think I got a
comment.
nod from Angel.
The DOT usually owns the set of trade-offs of limited curb space and roadway and the various things that want that. In the case of open restaurant, it was not part of the trade-off system, right? That really came from the prior mayor, and it was just like, this is policy, and oh, by the way, this is going to be permanent. And it never came into the whole system of, we have loading zones, we have cars that want to park there, we might need it as a lane for traffic itself, all those things. I mean, I know we were in part talking about sidewalk, but even to some extent, well, basically, again, that was unusual, and that it didn't even go to the agency. That was really something that sort of came from the mayor. I'll be curious to see, to what extent that they've reflected in the ongoing program, sort of the concerns about, we don't have roadbed to give to anything. Already it's a disaster. We already don't have enough parking and loading zones and 12 other things,
Big concern with parking. So there was a hearing, as you probably know, on this particular topic. This particular legislation is not actually in place because it has to go to the council. So there's still be a vote required by the city, and it's still, it's a process. So if it gets voted down at the council, then it will not become a law. So we've got to wait to see what the council says.
Well,
All right, guys.
do we maybe want to have a resolution on that?
Guys, let's just keep our questions shorter
I had
than
a
our
quick
comments
question,
even
too.
shorter. No, wait a minute. It's 10 o'clock. It's 10 p.m. We love each other's company, but it's already been 3.5 hours. So let's just make our very short comments or questions in reference to Isidro's presentation. Mary Anderson, you haven't asked anything.
I'm just wondering about these restaurants that have 2 and 3 areas of, open restaurant area, places, around their restaurant. I don't understand.
Under the new legislation, the restaurant will only be able to occupy the space that is right in front of them. They cannot extend. So that's something that is new with the new legislation. You cannot extend, even if you have the permission from the landlord to extend.
Yeah, because there's a couple of restaurants that I know that have, one in the front and one on the side, and then they have on the sidewalk too. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Sally, and then Domingo, and then that'll be the last comment on this.
Okay, we speak through resolutions. We've actually already passed a resolution on this through Wayne's committee. Y'all did it through the executive committee. We then affirmed it in the following meeting because it was due before. So I wonder why we aren't weighing in now with the council now that it's become a legislative matter. Because we, along with many of the other Manhattan community boards, were opposed to the change in the zoning text, and also the fact that this idea would not be piloted, nor there were really any plans to address sanitation issues. The fact that fire safety, fire lanes, bike lanes, and everything, music, noise, rats, everything else that was going on. Lack of access on sidewalks for people who are disabled or in wheelchairs. But we have already spoken on this as a board. Can't we forward that to City Council?
Yes, we should. We really should. Okay, thank Domingo, and then call it a day as far as Isidro's presentation.
Yeah, because I want to be able to reiterate what give me a second.
Steve.
No. What Marielle said, right? And this is what I always state every single month, right? When we make assumptions based on how we feel, how this impacts our access to elected officials, we create a situation where the state is weaponized against, in this particular case, small businesses. So my biggest thing is, how do we, right, understand that these licenses can't necessarily be, you can't predict what's going to happen, right? Because in one way or another, what you're going to create is a sort of bias is going to take over, right? Because and I always say it seems to be very specific licenses that are constantly ridiculed, that are constantly targeted. And then all of a sudden, and this situation proves it, right? Liz is a board member, and it seemed to be certain suggestions were given that mitigated the impact that was created from a business, right? So we can't necessarily assume that every single business is bad or that any situation that arises is a deal ender, when all we have to do is engage the business and give them certain recommendations. Once those recommendations are given and it doesn't work, you create a system where certain recommendations are constantly given to a point where it's like, bro, you're striking out, right? Or sis, whatever, right? So I think it's very important to take this as a case study on the possibilities of what happens when you allow people to operate and then work through the errors and stop being constantly so punitive and negative around small business owners looking to create their businesses and make a buck in the community that they most likely have some attachment to. Because Isidro, and I was big on this, we have to maintain consistency, because that's the only way we're going to identify when things start veering off. And one thing folks have not been consistent in this community board is around targeting businesses of color with the assumptions that they're going to be problematic even before they're open. And we have to be very clear on that.
Domingo, and your point is well made. And I noticed, unfortunately, on our last meeting, if you can see the tape, we had a huge division between ethnicity, and that was disappointing. But when we hear about a bad operator or someone that might be a bad operator, I'm very happy to report that at least 3 or 4 committee members did go to one restaurant that was considered to be an issue. And when we went there, we found out that at least within the operating aspect of the business, there were no violations at all. The problem is mostly outside, and we noted. And again, we're going to our work, and we try to be consistent, but it's hard sometimes because we don't know everything about a particular neighborhood or particular operator, but we'll definitely try our best.
Righty, thank you guys. As long as it's the operation and not the operator, we'll be fine. Faye, with the last report.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chairman.
for your patience, Faye.
That's okay. That's our last name.
I said that Isidro could go before me. I didn't say that I didn't have a report. I don't mind going last, but
Well,
I do have a report.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you can go, Faye. I'll go
No,
after
it's okay.
Faye.
Absolutely not even legal to report. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. I just, there's not a lot going on. I do want to give a shout out to a member of the community who had provided feedback, which turned into a resolution which we passed unanimously and which was then passed by the full board. And I'm pleased to report that the elected officials to whom we directed the resolution about the lighthouse link is seeming to get a little bit of traction and some interest. So, I like it when we can work together, the community and the community board and the electeds to effect change around infrastructure and resources. I had a productive conversation with EDC. I know that he is planning on reaching out to you, Eleazar, and to Ebenezer to set up a Zoom as well, but he was able to give me a short update on the IRPAC, the Immigrant Research and Performing Arts Center, and hopefully they will be able to come to the committee and give a fuller presentation to the public. we had a very productive conversation at our last meeting with our new council member, Carmen De La Rosa. And it was really nice to get a sense from her about what some of her priorities are for funding in the areas of parks and cultural affairs. The Parks Department is the only agency that doesn't have its own capital budget. So we do rely on our elected officials to provide the funding for the capital projects that communities want to see around parks and recreation and waterfront. So it was really nice to get a sense of where she was at. She's incredibly accessible and hardworking, and I'm super optimistic that some of the projects that have been long priorities for this board may actually get some funding. So that's going to be it's going to be solid. And that's pretty much, oh, I have one question. It affected my committee this month, but I know it's been an issue for other committees. It would be very helpful if we had a clearer sense of what's the process for reviewing resolutions before they go out to make sure that they've got all the right contact information. So for example, the resolution about the lighthouse link went out with the old commissioner. It had the new commissioners, or actually the now former commissioner's name and the previous commissioner in the salutation. So sort of everything about it was a little bit wrong. And that just makes us look a little silly. So, you know, I'd like to know what's the process for making sure that we have the right commissioners' names, the right elected officials' names, and that the right information is in our resolutions so that they don't have those kinds of mistakes.
Beautiful. Thank you. Faye.
Thank you. Yes, well, I'm going to be very, very brief. I just wanted to say that we had two wonderful presentations. And one of the presentation, which is from the Upper Manhattan Mental Health, I want to thank Stevie, because Steve was the one who recommended them to attend our committee. And I can tell you that the presentation was spectacular. It was like finding treasure in the back of your house with all the information that we learned. We also have a second presentation from the youth program coordinator from YAS, I think it's Gas Power Initiative. I'm not going to go into detail. I just wanted to suggest that you, when you have some time, just look at the YouTube, or, you know, or ask for the link so you can view the whole presentation. And very last, in regard to the minutes where you're going to find the details, I wanted just to say and put this up there that from now on, our minutes are not going to be too elaborated, given the facts that we have a link, and the link provide all details. Unfortunately, in the transcript, some of the words or translation get lost, but I think that the most concrete information will be found and accurately, you know, in the minutes. So from now on, don't expect a long and, you know, an elaborated minutes. And that's what, you know, I already started in the last month. So this is my report, and I thank you all for your patience. Good night.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Great night on new business. I would like to add our consideration basically of Ebenezer Smith, our district manager's request for a merit-based increase for as long as he's been around, he hasn't gotten. So I want to put that out there for the next executive meeting. We again going to go into executive session and discuss it until further notice. I'm going to ask you guys to put a motion on the floor for the adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Great night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.